Welcome to the first episode of Stay at Home, a series I've decided to create to teach people how to video edit whilst we're stuck at home. And basically I just thought, you know what, people are going to be stuck at home, I might as well teach them something useful. So I've got this series here, which I'm going to start with the basics of video editing and then go into some like more interesting cool effects and that. But today's video, I'm going to start with what like video editing software should you start using. I'm just going to go through, talk about all the different softwares I've used, just what my recommendations are. And now without further ado, hit like and subscribe, do it now, right now. Now let's get into the video. Okay, so starting off editing, I wouldn't recommend going straight into one of the big editing softwares like Premiere or anything like that. You can, but it's a very steep learning curve and it's just not the best way to learn. So there's a couple like basic editing software that I want to share with you to start off. First of those is Vegas Movie Studio, which is the editing software I started off using back when it was Sony Vegas Movie Studio. To be fair, at the time I only got it because of the price tag and I didn't want to have to pay like £300 whatever for Vegas Pro. In all honesty, it was a really good decision because it allowed me to learn how to edit using something that was still pretty powerful but pretty like easy to get a grasp of. So I would definitely recommend starting off with Vegas Movie Studio. If you're on a Windows computer, you can't get Vegas. Or even Vegas Pro on a Mac for some reason. They just haven't ported it. I don't know why. They'd make a lot more money if they did so. It's all around a very like nifty piece of software for the price, and I definitely recommend it. Second I'm going to recommend is Adobe Premiere Elements, which is a more stripped down version of Adobe Premiere for people who are starting off. It's also got quite a reduced price tag from the full Premiere. If you want to go on to use Adobe Premiere, then I'd definitely recommend starting off with Premiere Elements. I personally didn't do that. I now edit almost solely in Premiere, but I started off with Movie Studio and then moved on to Vegas Pro, and now I've moved on to Premiere in the past like 3 years or so. It was a really weird switch between Vegas and Premiere because it was just so... They're similar programs, but they're also really different. So getting used to it took about like half a year. Yeah, if you can avoid that 6-month period, then all the better. Now the last sort of starting off editing program that I'm going to recommend is Davinci Resolve. Davinci Resolve is free, which is why I'm recommending this. Not everyone here is going to want to like invest... I know it's only like 50 quid or something for Vegas Movie Studio. I can't remember how much Premiere Elements is, but some people who just want to start off, invest nothing, then Davinci Resolve is definitely the best option for you out there. It's sort of the same as the other two, but for free software, it is pretty powerful. Also, quite easy to use, and there's a lot of helpful tutorials out there on how to use it. I might go through some myself. Davinci Resolve is a stripped down version of a bigger software called Davinci Resolve Studio, which I'm going to go on to talk about in a bit. Yeah, links to all three of those will be down in the description, as well as the rest of the software that I am going to mention in this video. Now once you've got the hang of these starting off editing softwares, we're now going to go up to the next level. At the next level there is basically 3 editing softwares that just sort of outshine all of them. First one, I've said about it many times, I do all my tutorials on it, it's Adobe Premiere Pro. Premiere is really powerful for all-round use and it's really quick to be able to do stuff. But the main selling point of Premiere is that it integrates with all the other Adobe applications. So when you want to go on to use After Effects, you can directly use After Effects with Premiere, and you can also edit photos from Premiere in Photoshop and they automatically update and everything, which is really awesome. Also, audio recorded in Adobe Audition can quickly be moved into Premiere, and it's just such a like fast workflow. It's the main reason I switched from Vegas to Premiere, is just because Premiere is so much like easier to use with other applications. Whereas say if I wanted to edit an image in Photoshop in Vegas, I'd have to go to the image, open it in Photoshop, edit it, and then save it again as something else and then relink it. Whereas in Premiere, you can literally just right click on the image and then click edit in Photoshop, do your edits, press save, and it will automatically appear in Premiere. Next up I'm going to talk about is Vegas Pro, which I said about a bit earlier. It's a really powerful program that honestly I think I would still be using to this day if it was easier to like work with different like Adobe programs and stuff with it because I switched to like Photoshop and that. So I wanted to be able to use Photoshop within my editing and After Effects. And secondly, that it was available on Mac. It's only available on Windows for some reason. They just haven't ever decided to port it. I don't know why. There probably is a reason why, but yeah. So if you're a Mac user, you can just ignore this, but if you're a Windows user, I definitely recommend Vegas Pro, especially if you started on Vegas Movie Studio, because it's the same layout, the same stuff, just with a lot more functionality. And I really like the speed ramping, and I can't remember exactly what it's called on Vegas, but like the velocity thing, that was really cool and a lot better than Premiere's version. Yeah, links to it will be down in the description. And the third sort of getting better program I'm going to talk about is Final Cut Pro. And a lot of people who want to get into editing have already used programs such as iMovie. I know I used iMovie when I was a kid, and used to use the trailer function to make all kinds of movie trailers. I'm not going to play any now because they're really embarrassing, but that sort of is what piqued my interest in editing. So I definitely recommend Final Cut if you are familiar with a lot of Apple products. Final Cut is only available on Apple, so it's like the opposite side of Vegas, but it is really powerful. And one plus about Final Cut is the render time is insanely quick. So if you're completely new to editing, then render time is basically how long it takes to turn your video from your edit into the actual video file. And because Final Cut is an Apple product, Apple manage the hardware that it's running on, so they can like integrate stuff and make it run really quickly and render really quickly. So if you need quick renders, I know some Final Cut people will disagree with me, but it's a lot quicker than using Adobe Premiere. The final one I'm going to recommend, it's not really too much of a recommendation because it is quite difficult to use, but I'm going to talk about Lightworks. And I'm only talking about this one because it is free, and I don't want to like alienate people who don't want to spend a load of money on these programs. Lightworks is free. It's been used to edit many like cinema and films over the past like 20 years. I'm not sure when was it. Lightworks was released in 1989 apparently. That's mental. I do find Lightworks to be a bit tricky, and the reason I didn't mention it at the beginning was because it is really complicated to learn, and it will completely put you off editing if you start editing as a beginner on it. There are people who like recommend that you use it if you don't want to spend any money, but I'd really recommend going for one of the other editing software. I'm just mentioning this if you do want to take your editing to the next level but don't want to pay money for it. Lightworks does have a pro version, which is 250 quid, which allows you to do stuff above 720p resolution, but I would definitely recommend the other two over this one. Now finally, I want to get to if you want to increase your editing skills further, and there's a few programs that I'm going to recommend. The first is Adobe After Effects. Most people know what Adobe After Effects is. It's basically in essence a special effects program. You can do 3D effects, you can get all sorts of plugins for it, and it's basically one of the most versatile pieces of software ever made, I feel, because there's so much you can do with it. But I would definitely have a firm understanding of Adobe Premiere before you make the leap into After Effects, because it can be a bit confusing. Also, it is a little bit confusing to get your head around because whereas in Premiere you have tracks and the tracks go up, it does the same thing in After Effects, but instead of tracks, it is layers like in Photoshop, whereas you can only have one thing on each layer, and that can be confusing to get your head around, but once you get your head around it, it's a really powerful piece of software. Yeah, also, as well as Premiere, links in with all the other Adobe applications, so that's a good plus of using After Effects. And there's not a competitor to After Effects, so it's something that you're probably good if you choose to pursue like a video editing / special effects career. You can't really go around After Effects. It's just the industry standard for that type of work. Next, I'm going to talk about Davinci Resolve Studio, which is the pro version, I guess, of Davinci Resolve. And Davinci Resolve Studio is awesome. It allows you to use a lot of plugins while still keeping a sort of linear editing environment like Premiere and Davinci do. It's also a lot easier to use than After Effects if you want cool effects, but you find After Effects a bit daunting. It also comes with a load of Boris effects, which are a standard package of effects that I use all the time in my videos and what I do. Lastly is Cinema 4D if you want to go to further into special effects and learn 3D modeling and 3D effects. But I would definitely watch a ton of tutorials before going into that, because it can get really confusing if you've never used a 3D environment before and you've never done effects in 3D before. It does take a lot of learning. Go to college for it, maybe. But yeah, thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it informative. All of these software are linked in the description below. Leave a like if you liked this video and found it helpful, and comment down below any ideas for this series, and I'll see you guys in the next video.